All right.
And we're back. Welcome, everybody. Our first speaker is Mark Cafazzo, and he's going to be doing one of the xAPI cohort demos for Team xAPI Developer Tools. So, Mark, you can take it away.
All right. It's been a very interesting day. I will apologize in advance. Our VPN session at work, where my entire presentation lives and works best, is there. So there might be a couple blips as my remote desktop decides to reconnect. Things are going pretty good right now. So welcome. I'm going to talk today about the xAPI project that I did for the cohort, and that was building a validation extension inside of Visual Studio Code. So one of the things I'm going to do differently from last time is I've had a lot of questions about how do you do that? How do you build a Visual Studio extension? It will have an xAPI theme, but I'd like to go through that a little bit very briefly. And at the end, I'm going to talk about web standards and technology standards in general. So this is completely unscripted, and I'm going to take you through my process of working on a problem space using technology and namely software engineering to solve that problem. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to be sharing the screen too. A little bit of a trick to this. It's going to be this one right here. Okay. Now what you should be seeing on your screen is my mouse moving around and the starting point of working with an xAPI technology. So I went straight to ADL.net or ADLNet and went to the xAPI spec documents and started reading. That's really what you have to do. So wanting to validate an xAPI statement means that you need to understand the spec as well as possible, understand what you're looking at, and understand how they would actually go about validating it. So on to my next thing. The reason why I needed this was because I got involved in this. I went and took Devlin Peck's course, and I needed to send an xAPI query. Actually, this is a different thing, but I needed to send an xAPI statement to a sample LRS, and I had issues, and it looked to me like my xAPI statement wasn't valid. I mean, you had to write it from scratch. So that's really the starting point there. Then I started looking for, well, how do you actually validate xAPI? And it's a JSON file. So it's JSON data. So it makes sense to look at what someone else has done. So AGGV has one. I looked at that, actually tried using that. And there's some things I didn't like about it, namely in what it reports, how it actually reports on errors in the format that comes in. There was not enough information there. So also learned how to realize that they're using JSON schema validation. So everything you do requires, generally speaking, requires understanding of a supportive technology. So I'm just going to go back and back to my AirMate session, make sure you guys can see everything. You guys and gals can see everything. Okay, we're good. Everything's working. So then I went to jsonschema.org and learned about how JSON schemas are structured. And that laid the foundation for then getting into building a Visual Studio extension. So I like to bring everything to first principles first and then start moving forward. I don't write code for a very long time, actually. I do a lot of scoping and a lot of knowledge base work before I do anything and get a plan put together. So understanding of the Visual Studio Code API, it's amazing. You can do almost anything inside of Visual Studio Code, which is my editor. So I'm going to get to that in a second, give you a quick sneak peek of the editor. So this is Visual Studio Code. It has a number of features like you would normally see in most developer IDEs for writing code. It's definitely a light version of Visual Studio proper, its predecessor. And this is actually the code of the extension here. So very quickly, I'm going to get to the part where I talk about how to get that started, how to build an extension for anything, namely xAPI validation in this case. All right. So one of the things I wanted to get into which goes further than what I've already demoed, which was the extension itself. As far as I've gotten, I want to get into, I need to understand how to select text. So how do you select text and then do something? And this is the thing I looked up here to figure that out. Lots of Google grokking, lots of figuring things out. Also wanted to look into how to highlight syntax, as that's the next step, is to highlight things as you're coding and have a syntax highlight. If you type something wrong in something invalid in an xAPI statement that you're building, or you want to take an existing file and look at it, it'd be nice to be able to highlight what's actually wrong with it. And that brings us to the actual meat of this. We're going to talk about how do you get started building a Visual Studio Code extension. A lot of this will be very similar in other IDEs of your choice, where you want to build some tools within that. The IDE that developers actually use is the best starting point, as opposed to, we talked about this within our Slack channel, what constitutes a third-party tool. There's a number of things that go into that thinking, and I can get into that through Q&A later. And anytime you have a question, you can go to we still have the Slack channel, so you can ask me questions there. Basically, it's something that's well within the programming paradigm of the development community that you're trying to support. It's something that you can reuse somewhere else, and namely within your workflow. So that's what I was going for when I developed this. So what I'm going to do right now is close this and go to my demo folder. And we're going to get started building an actual extension. And Microsoft makes it very easy. They want you to develop extensions for their platform. So the very first thing you do is, well, clear the screen. And then you do this, npm install global. I'm going to build what's called a Yeoman, if I can spell right, generator. I believe it's -code. Yeah. So I'm installing that right now. And I may have already installed it. I'm not sure if this is a step I need to take, but this will show you the initial step that you need to take. So Yeoman is basically a code generator, and it builds different packages based on the platform that you're working in. There's ones for React, and also there's one for many other projects that you might create in a different language and platform. And they also have something for creating Visual Studio Code projects from scratch. So it's thinking, there we go. The typical messages that come from installing an npm package. I'm going to clear that screen out of the way, and I'm just going to type yo code. I get a neat little bit of ASCII art, and the Yeoman is asking me what I want to do. It immediately goes straight to, and I'm just going to do another double check to make sure that my screen share is working. Yep. Can I just get a few shout outs to, yes, you do actually. I'm looking at that question right now. It is on GitHub. It is our project. It's actually a fork of something, because I was already doing this, commissioned by my company, but we've made it a publicly accessible repo. So yes, you do need Node.js. So this is one of the things I didn't do, is I do have Node.js and its accompanying NPM. I started using Nodist, and then I went right back to working with just having Node.js installed without a version manager. And this is basically it. This is Microsoft has this mantra. It's been their motto for years and years. It just works. And I work both in Microsoft technologies and outside, and it does. It just works. They make sure that you do it. Now I'm going to basically one of the prerequisites for building a Visual Studio Code extension is that you need to know TypeScript, not just JavaScript, but TypeScript, because that's what Visual Studio Code is actually written in platform. There's a couple of other languages in play as well, but I'm going to create a new. You can also use vanilla JavaScript. It just realize that. I'm going to basically create a new extension TypeScript. I'm going to select that, make sure I'm on the right screen here. I'm going to name my extension xAPI party. Same. And I give you, I'm just going to type, it's really cool. Yes, I'm going to initialize it as a Git repository because I want to get to GitHub. I am not going to bundle it with Webpack. I don't think. Which package manager? I want to use Yarn because they have a cool logo of a cat playing with a ball of yarn. So I now like it better than NPM. I have a problem. I have a technologist ADD sometimes, but it actually, there's some very good advantages to using Yarn over the old NPM. Okay, trying to copy from a source that does not exist. I don't know what that means. So there, I did actually hit an error code. Now I'm going to see if the project got created. And then I'm going to bail and go to my remote desktop and show you what the pre-made version of that. And I'm going to go here to Visual Studio Code again and open up my extension. So all that to say, so you do, that's basically what you do, and it would actually create a bunch of files, which it was supposed to do. But because I was just using, I actually started with my backup, so which is here. It did not, oh, wait a minute. No, it didn't. Okay, so we're going to go right over to a pre-made extension. That might be a little bit jarring. Anyway, long story short, doing that, I got to figure out which, let's close this out and go into the actual extension I was working on. So long story short, I'm going to gloss over a little bit here. It creates a bunch of files. It creates your package JSON, your TS config for JSON, sets up a TypeScript project for you with all the bells and whistles, including the debugging and testing of a Visual Studio Code extension. And all you do for that is you run the extension. So very, very quickly, this is where you start with your extension. You make some entries for your extension in the JSON. You can look up all this on Microsoft's excellent documentation for this. So there's the name, there's the command and the title of my extension and a number of other things there. And then the actual code of it is here. So you have an extension context, a couple of other things. I won't get into the details because it's quite the nitty-gritty at this point. But you register your command inside of the Visual Studio Code space. And this is all pre-packaging and sending to the marketplace. So I've got a number of things going on here. You can see where I'm loading it. Actually did end up using AGV. There was another one that I didn't quite like. This actually worked for me. I'm adding a format here. And I'm actually parsing the JSON, and I'm parsing the selected text that lives inside of this context when the extension actually fires up. So here's all my imports, my constant setup. If you know anything about programming languages, this may look very familiar. I'm exporting the function into the namespace of the Visual Studio instance, and off we go. So what I really want to show is that you run, everything is set up just by typing in yo code and making those selections. If everything goes well, you'll end up with a starter project that you can continue on with. It starts with the hello world. As we all know, that's the starting place for looking at any new tech. And we just run the extension here. There we go. Just the context of my mouse is a little unknown here because I'm remote. I'm going to drag that over to this. It opened up on another screen. And here I am inside of a test project where I have already selected the xAPI statement that I'm going to look at. I type Control-Shift-P, and I validate my snippet, and it tells me that it's valid. Again, if I name something weird, and this will have to keep me on track with time here because I'm not looking. It's 2 o'clock. Okay, so I've been 15 minutes so far. And then I'm going to run it again. And it will tell me, give me a pop-up here. There will also be, one of the things I need to figure out is whether I want this or whether I want this down in the bottom right here. Also, there's a time-based thing here. This actually will disappear after a while. So in order to revalidate, I actually have to very quickly do this. I'll fix it. And then I just knocked my vertical mouse off its kilter. And so if I had time, and I have to slow that down a bit, I would actually be able to revalidate while I'm still on screen here. Let's try that one more time. We'll be a little quicker this time. So, okay, I'll fix it. I'll fix the code, reselect it. My reselect isn't working quite right here, and I'm going to revalidate. Now we're good. So I just need to work on that and just slow that down a bit and actually keep that as a, it's actually one of the hurdles I need to solve is how do I keep this thing in the bottom right actually running until the user does an action, does an action of some sort, because obviously we don't want to be under the gun. Yes, we're quick. Developers learn how to be very quick, but that might be a little bit too quick. I think it's about a minute and a half before, and that could be an eternity if you're still trying to figure out why your statement is actually invalid. So that's how it works. I close this. Visual Studio Code does a bunch of things to close all that up and flush everything out. And we're back to developing. So really, I can't take much credit for figuring out how to create a Visual Studio Code extension because it's just really easy and it's a great place to get started. So I recommend that if you want to look into this a little bit further, go to code.visualstudio.com API/get started, or just Google Visual Studio Code extensions, your first extension, and you'll get right to the information that you need. And Microsoft really, truly makes it very easy to do. And there's really no reason not to figure that out. Now, Visual Studio itself, writing extensions for it is a little bit more complicated, a little bit more bulky, a little bit more of a learning curve there. But Visual Studio Code just makes everything on the light edition of developing Microsoft technologies very easy. Also, Visual Studio Code is not restricted to just .NET programming languages in the platform. It can be used for all sorts of things. There's a Go extension for it. You can write Go in it. You can use it for Python. You can use it for Rust. You can use it for all kinds of different languages, and it's getting widespread adoption. I have a friend who's in GIS and he uses Python and he uses Visual Studio Code just as much as I do to do what he does in the GIS mapping space. So again, I'm going to get back to my error meet. And I'm going to share a different screen. So if you have any questions, I'm actually looking at a few more. Yeah, bake at 350 for 1 hour. Yeah, that's great. I had my mise en place all ready to go, and then it had some. It really is like a cooking show. Has the same feel. Unless you can customize the timing in the extension. Yes, that is definitely a place that I'm going to look. Just had some time constraints there. So yes, that would be actually a really cool feature. If they don't have that, that's a great suggestion to send to the Visual Studio Code team. They have a forum for feature requests and other things. That would be cool. Just timeout for the, it's not, and I don't think it's the extension level. It's the API for alerts and notifications. I think that was where I needed to go there. But yeah, if I could say, hey, any alerts that this extension creates, can I have a timer on it? Everything but infinite, which would be a problem, of course. But I would like that basically to be there until another event is fired, which would be right. And so that means maybe having a listener or something that would listen in and then kind of periodically look at it. Now I found that having some kind of listener technology can be problematic because it can interfere with the user experience. So that's where I understand why a notification does have a time limit, and that makes a lot of sense to me. That you wouldn't want to have something, and then you got to have something that's constantly polling the page that the developer is trying to work on. They may just want to go and on to work on something completely unrelated, and that just becomes a nag problem. So yeah, that's definitely a fine line there and a balancing act to look at that. But it would be nice to at least give the developer a limit of 5 minutes and still be able to hook into a push event that would say, hey, it's valid now, you can go away, or at least bring up the next notification that says we're all good, your xAPI statement is valid, on you go. So this has implications for using this not in a Visual Studio Code or development workplace environment, more as a reusable package of code that can validate xAPI statements. Might want something in there that's listening in for when it does actually become valid. So what I'm going to do now is see if my RDP session is still okay, and then check and make sure that that's the screen you're seeing. Okay. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to fire them my way offline to this session. I do want to make sure that I allow Matt to start his presentation on time. Really quickly now, I'm going to talk about standards because I did look into that for xAPI and other things. So there is some effort to get it standardized with the IEEE, which is a technology standards organization. So to look into that, I have been a member of the WebAssembly working group for many, many years, and at least for as long as it's been around. And that's been a very interesting journey. And now we finally got to the point where it's actually a W3c recommendation. This is a very long process, and it's something that I believe that xAPI and CMI5 and others, they need to go through this. And so there actually is some activity there as an IEEE standard. I think actually if it's going to live in the web, that it actually could, someone should consider getting it out as a W3c recommendation and get a working group together. That would be very cool. What we do have right now is this IEEE, this is an IEEE xAPI working group to introduce it as a working standard. You see the date here, 2017. It's a long process. ADL has been instrumental in getting this going. I firmly believe in technology standards. It is the way to make sure that something becomes ubiquitous in the marketplace. So if we want to see this take the next evolutionary step, then please consider, this is from Rastiki, right? They talk about getting xAPI ready to be an IEEE standard. And you'll notice here it says, if you would like to get involved with any of these groups, you can find contact information here. So please consider that if you feel that, and it is a calling to be part of a working group for a standards body. But I would encourage you to look into this if you feel like you have something to contribute here. Because really in the end, unless you go through this process, for example, we're looking at Web 2.0 is really not a standard. It's more of a set of guidelines for what Web 2.0 looks like. It took Web 1.0, which was basically hyperlinks on web pages, and took it a step further. And now we have social media and the web as application. Web 3.0 takes it to a whole new level where it's an encrypted platform for inherent security and a higher degree, and WebAssembly plays into that, where it's a higher level of execution space with the browser and the web in general as the environment that it lives in. So that was my last little plug there. I have one more. I'm actually using a microphone boom mic or a mic stand with my webcam attached so that I can look directly at the screen. So what that means is I have a little product plug to do here, and it is talking about us. Where did I put that? Let's see here. Could be here. I'll just type it in. Here we go. So they have a middle screen camera. You can see here it's hooks to the top, and it has a little gooseneck and a little pinhole camera that goes into the center of your screen. And this allows you to look directly at the people that you're talking to. This has been a game changer for me. My camera is quite a bit bigger, but anyway, I just want to put that product plug in there because we're all remote. That was a voluntary product plug. But for me, I'm going to pick one up. It's in pre-order right now, and that can be a game changer. I think that's a game changer for regaining that connection that we've all lost over this 2-year period of having to do everything remotely. So I think it's excellent, and I think the price point is great. So take a look at CenterCam, but more importantly, look at what consider whether you might have something to offer. Yeah, I actually do believe it involves GPU computing in terms of Web3. So look at helping out with getting xAPI, and I believe CMI has made some great strides into getting this as introduced as a web standard, because I believe that it not only applies to e-learning, which has been the bread and butter of xAPI and CMI5, but in terms of being an experience API, I think that has makes inroads into the whole UX space for determining whether an online experience has achieved what it set out to do. So just for experiences in general, I think it could be catch on and go way further, in which it started to do, go way further than being used just for e-learning. It has a strong e-learning paradigm, but in terms of gauging a user's experience, a group of users' experience, this could even be melded together with Google's material design, where they want to try to standardize the online experience and what the interfaces look like that we use. So anyway,
thank you so much.
Yeah, that's basically my presentation. Matt Kliewer is up next, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please fire any questions. I didn't have time for a Q&A, but please feel free to fire me any question that you have, big or small, in our Slack channel, as we continue to go there and leverage that as our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will also have the lounge tables after this presentation is over as well, so you can feel free to ask more questions there for both Matt and Mark. And let's move right on to Matt's presentation. It's a Slack app for learning. Matt, take it away.
All right, thank you. And unfortunately, I don't have that center cam, so I'm going to be looking at all sorts of different places, and unfortunately, most of them are not going to be right there, but just know that I will be scanning the comments, but I'll probably miss something. So, but I will keep chugging along. So this project that I'm going to share is a Slack app that we created for a client that involves using xAPI behind the scenes. So a little bit of background on the project itself. It's a client project. So basically, what I'm going to show you has been kind of scrubbed of all of the client details. So can't show that. They didn't give us permission in time to be able to actually share any of that. But so it's a question there, Slack app comparable to Discord and Teams. Yeah, actually, it's a lot of similarities. They do a lot of the same things. And actually for the cohort itself, we considered Discord a couple years ago. It started out with gaming and stuff, but it's a good platform for it's extended beyond its original gaming focused. But you can build apps on top of these platforms, Teams as well. So this particular project was part of a pilot program that this company was creating to create a Slack learning journey. So their audience is sales leaders in their company. That's what they're starting with for this pilot program. Their current program is a mix of some custom LMS content. So they have their own custom built LMS, but it has some various documents and things you can put in there, but there's a lot of parts of it that are in different scattered places, and it's not all accumulated in one place. So it makes it a little bit hard for people to find where they need to go. There's no notifications that say you need to have this done by this time. It's a little bit of a janky experience for both the users and the people who are trying to kind of track what's going on. So their custom LMS doesn't have any social component currently, so people can't really talk to each other about things, and there's no xAPI. They're thinking about trying to add it to their LMS, but right now they're just kind of getting started with some of the xAPI, and this project is part of that. They also want to, at some point, transition a lot of their learning to Slack. So they're using their own platform, but they also kind of want to move a lot of this over time to Slack because people are working. So that you're probably familiar with this phrase, learning in the flow of work. And there's different ways of doing that, and there's different ups and downs of doing that. But in this case, because they're already doing a lot of their work in Slack, and the sales teams themselves, they want them to start using that for customers to be able to communicate with customers. So they're going to be there a lot. So keeping a lot of this learning there keeps them from having to go back to another platform and do another thing and log in there and do, So for this demo, this is a custom Slack app. So, you have the core platform of Slack, but then you can create your custom app. So if you've ever use Slack for your own teams, or use the cohort Slack, we've got several apps that you can add on there, so different companies can build their own. You basically have to kind of have your own infrastructure, and so you write your own app, upload it, connect it. There's a lot of different configuration and things you have to do there, but then you can kind of connect it with the Slack experience. So just a few technical details for anyone who's curious, but it uses Node.js. As we were just saying in the previous, it's basically a JavaScript server-side platform. And it uses the Bolt platform, which is actually made by Slack specifically for this purpose of communicating back and forth between your app and the Slack platform. So if you're curious about that, you can go to slack.dev and you'll see some links there. There's a few other different programming languages that it also supports. So it's also hosted on Heroku and using a Postgres database. So we're using a database to kind of handle some things that we could do with the xAPI, but it wasn't exactly the best way to do it. We needed to store some information, things that weren't hard-coded in the app, things like that. So I'm going to show this demo. We're sending xAPI to Watershed LRS in the actual pilot. For the demo that I'm going to be showing here in a minute, we're using Veracity because we didn't want to dirty the live data. But so for the demo that I'm going to show here in a minute, it is sending data to, and let me switch over to my screen here, or not that, wrong buttons. I've got my own equipment in the way. So the way it works is each cohort of learners, so they have a group of learners that are going through this program. And again, remember, this is a pilot program, so they're starting kind of small. So the group of people, they'll create a channel, and then they'll invite users to that channel. So they use kind of a format kind of like this, where they kind of group them and create a channel specifically for that group of people in a particular date. And so what they're actually working on in this cohort is actually pre-work for a ILT, instructor-led in-person training. So they had some pre-work that they wanted people to do before they came in. And typically before this, they would have people go to the LMS. They would say, okay, go through this, take this, do the survey, whatever, check off these things. But they're trying to streamline it here and just have it in a single journey that they can go through. So once people are invited to this channel, they'll get this invite from the app. So it's called Enablement Sidekick. That was the name that was chosen for this. So it kind of tells you a couple things that you're going to be doing. So you're going to be doing some of this pre-work. And let me know if anybody has trouble reading this. I can zoom in. I already zoomed in a little bit, but let me know if you're having trouble reading anything. But then you can go to the app home. So if you use any apps in Slack, you can see there's this app section. So you can jump down to that app running here. And so each app has its own home page that has kind of information about what's going on. And because I had to kind of sanitize this version, the client version, you'll see our company logos. You get tired of it because it's going to be showing up pretty much everywhere we had to replace a picture. But you can see, because I'm a facilitator, I have registered myself as a facilitator. So I kind of have a facilitator view. If you're just a regular user, there's a little more information here about what the program is, what you're gonna be doing, what the requirements are. They have about 2 weeks or so to complete the whole program. or not complete the whole program, complete the pre-work for the program before they get the ILT. So this can kind of help them to kind of get a little bit of information about how, their progress, how they're going through. So all the tasks. So it's basically just a kind of a checklist, but it's just a task that runs through in a linear path, and they're set up in checkpoints. So setting up camp is the first set of tasks. It's the first checkpoint and the next checkpoint, so on. And as you go through, you can see your progress. So basically, you can start this at any time. Once you're invited to the channel, you're in there. You can go through all the tasks at once if you want. You can go in and do a few tasks, and then go do your other work. But you can always come back and see where you are. So right now, these are all unchecked because I haven't done anything yet. There's a few helpful links. You can get help from a facilitator. So you can just write a message to your facilitator, which will go over to this private facilitators channel so that you can kind of have a one-on-one conversation there. And that way all the facilitators can be together and talk to each other about whatever they need to, but also just can get these messages from their cohort. So I'll click on the Get Started here, which will show this little onboarding. So you get a little information, and in the real thing, there's actually some screenshots here and some GIFs that show you what's going on. But for this purposes, we'll just kind of go through this. There's also a slash command so that you can see your progress from any message. You can just put in enablement progress and see that, which will show in a minute. But then it shows you your first task. So this is the welcome, kind of a little bit of progress indicator here, showing you what checkpoint you're in and how many you have to go, about how long it's going to take. And so basically from here, like I said, it's kind of a linear path. You click next and you go to the next one. They had these, what they call Slack hacks. So some of their audience is new to Slack. So a lot of people are familiar with it, but some of the people aren't as familiar, so they don't know everything you can do. So they have these little Slack hacks in here. And then we have a little bit of feedback at the bottom. So again, all of this is being captured with xAPI in the back end. So because we have control over our app, all the communication that happens here in Slack gets sent over to our app. We respond back to Slack and so forth, but we can send statements. So we know everything that the Slack platform has. So we know who the user is and things like that. For our pilot, we were kind of scrubbing the data because we weren't sure how we were going to use it. So we're not using real people's names. We're using their Slack ID, but we're using that as the actor. And then everything else is kind of designed to say, okay, every time you click next on a task, or you complete it, then that task is completed, and then you get a start time for the next one. In this case, this feedback will get feedback on whether that Slack hack was useful, and if nobody likes it, nobody finds it useful, maybe it'll get removed in a future iteration. This next step allows the users to select some information about them. So there's sort of some demographics and some roles and things like that. So it's used both for breakout groups, because once they get into the live sessions, they'll have breakout groups that they'll separate people into based on their kind of the role and different things that they'll set. So one of the things this does when you submit it gets sent to a Google Sheet, so they can just have that as an easy reference. But it also is sending xAPI that we can then use for all the subsequent xAPI statements. So I keep looking over here, but if I had that center cam, I could just look right in the middle. But all of this data will be used in subsequent xAPI statements so that we can then in reporting kind of slice and dice based on what group you're in. So where am I based? America. So these are pre-populated based on our app. So I'll go ahead and submit that. It basically asks you sure. You can retry if you get it wrong. Okay, so basically now that that's sent, everything from here on, like I said, is being embedded in those xAPI statements for further reporting. Here's another Slack hack. We'll kind of jump through. There's a survey. So a lot of these are external links. So I'm not going to click on it because it just goes out to a link I can't even access anyways. But there's a few of these. So we're also capturing whenever you click on a link. Now, we don't know what you do once you leave. So once you leave the Slack platform, anything you do there is not being tracked unless there's something you log into, and then that might be tracked. But it's not directly tracking. It's only It's only tracking that you clicked on something. So that's helpful. In this case, this is actually a link to a course, just a regular e-learning course in their platform. But again, for this pilot, we didn't have it directly connected, but in the future, one thing that would be cool is to be able to actually connect this and be able to just deep link into other platforms to be able to track things directly. So we'll move on here. So a lot of these are kind of similar things. So now we get to the end and we go into the next one. So you can stop here. And like I said, this is just a Slack channel here that you can just, or a messages page that you can just interact with all your tasks, then go just do your other work as needed. But you can always come back. One thing it does is that if you've been idle for 2 or 3 days, I can't remember, I think it's 3 days, it will send you a nudge message saying, hey, you started this program, but you only have 2 weeks to complete it. You can pick up back where you left off. So, whenever you go back to the home page, you can view next task, you can just go back to it and pick up where you left off. And since we're over here, I'll just show, you can also see as a facilitator, they can see the progress of their users. So there's 2 of me here. I think this is my other user that I was testing with. But this is me right now. So I am 23% or so done. But if you had, a bunch of people here, you can quickly see who's kind of where. And then if I check the progress here, it should, these are all checked off. This first one, this is where I am right now. So I'll go back over here. They're just kind of starting out. These are some worksheets that you can fill out. Again, those are going to external locations. These are 3 videos. So one thing in that previous, where we chose what our demographics were, what business division, all that we're in, that actually determines this custom content here. So it kind of personalizes the content as you go through. The user may not know that, but they're seeing specific content to their role or whatever it might be. So they watch these videos, and then there's a little bit of reflection. So they can actually enter in some information here. What is your biggest takeaway? So when you submit something here, I liked it, and I submit that reflection, it actually posts it to the channel that you were in. So, I was in the xAPI party channel, so it should post it there. And then, gotta scroll down. This is a weird bug in Slack. Sometimes when I come back to this messages, it scrolls me way up there. And then you can see if other people had submitted their reflections, you'd be able to see them here and reply to them directly. And then you can kind of create a bit of a conversation in the channels, just using some of the built-in Slack features, just the messaging that you always have in message threads. And so there's a few things like this where you have a watch the video or no thanks. So all this is being tracked so we can see, and actually I'll switch over real quick because we're kind of running low on time. In Watershed, all of this data is being sent here. So we set it up as a program so we can see for each of these checkpoints, where are people currently, how many people are in it, how many have completed these sections, and then you can drill down into each one of these milestones or checkpoints. So these are all the tasks that were within that setting up camp. So you can see where people are. It makes more sense with people a little bit further ahead here, but not as much down here. And then this is just a view of that demographics panel that I was looking at, where you can see how many people have, this many people have coaching experience, what segments, how many years of leadership, that sort of thing. But then you can look at, these are all the links, video and audio. I just kind of collected them all together. But you can kind of get an idea of how many people are actually clicking on those and viewing those resources, how many people found those Slack hacks helpful. But once you have that other data, you can actually drill down into just the sales development role, how many people view these resources. So you can do that for any of the other data that we're capturing. And so the goal for this project is to kind of test it out, see what we get, see how people like it, what can we do better. So the vision is in the future to be able to kind of expand on this, maybe have a builder for the different programs. So someone could come in and say, okay, I want to make a program that has these tasks in it, these videos, these things, connects to this thing. And then they could create that, and then it would just be part of that, and they can invite people to it, and they can just go through and work on their tasks. Then have all this xAPI data to be able to look at it and see what they need to improve and where people are and how they're doing. So create some engagement with their program. So that is all I've got. So thank you very much for attending, and have a good party. Oh, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Matt. I saw Mark had more of a comment saying that he needs to talk to you regarding a project requirement that he's been scoping. But again, we have the lounge available after this session, so everybody's welcome to join us there. We're going to take a quick break for about 10 minutes. We will be back with 2 more presentations. So we'll see you then. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Matt.